The year is 2015. Marc Jarvis is a man who seems to have it all. He has an exciting, well-paying job that truly interests him. He's surrounded by loyal friends who would support him through anything. And most importantly, the woman he loves is always by his side. His life appears blessed, and his future looks bright, until everything changes with one devastating diagnosis. A doctor tells Marc he has a severe form of cancer. At best, he has 1 year left to live. Chemotherapy and strong medication might extend his life, but there are no guarantees. Faced with the reality of his irreversible condition, Marc accepts it and begins preparing for the end. He hands over his business to trusted colleagues, teaching them how to continue his work. He sells his home, gives away most of his belongings to friends, and shares the heartbreaking news with his mother and girlfriend, begging the woman he loves to find happiness no matter what. As the end nears, Marc drifts into childhood memories, realizing he never truly appreciated the moments he had, always assuming there would be more time. But now, time is slipping away. Weeks later, Marc, Naomi, and a few close friends gather for a farewell party. During the emotional evening, someone mentions a company called Miracle Health, a controversial but fast-growing private corporation that uses cryostasis to preserve bodies, hoping to revive people once future medicine can cure their diseases and give them a second chance at life. Intrigued, Marc seriously considers the experimental procedure. But to qualify, he must die before the cancer spreads too far. After much thought, he makes the heartbreaking decision to end his life early, preserving his chance of being revived in the future. Naomi is devastated. She wanted to be with him till the end and can't bear to lose him even a moment sooner. Still, Marc goes through with it. He dies voluntarily, hoping one day to return. The year is 2084 to 70 years later. Miracle Health successfully revives Marc. Doctors and assistants surround him, monitoring his vitals and making sure his condition is stable. Weak and disoriented, Marc soon loses consciousness. Later, he wakes up and sees his reflection for the first time. He feels terrible, overwhelmed by weakness and a splitting headache. Drive West, one of the lead physicians, sits down for a talk. He gently asks if Marc remembers anything from his past life. Marc manages to recall a few fragments from 2015, but the memories are hazy. Soon, Marc learns he is the first person ever brought back to life. His body is now an advanced biological system. Only 20% of his original organs remain. The rest is made up of 65% cloned muscles and tissue, 10% bionic implants, and 5% technical devices. One such device is located on his abdomen, with an external port where a cable can be connected. This allows scientists to collect real-time health data and provide immediate medical support when needed. After Marc's revival, the doctors face unexpected challenges. His body is extremely weak, he can barely move or speak, and needs constant care. He's under 24/7 supervision and takes dozens of pills daily, including painkillers and essential medications to stay alive. Despite everything, Marc keeps pushing. Before long, he manages to take his first steps. He still can't walk alone, but he's never left unsupported. His personal assistant, Elizabeth, is always by his side, fully committed to helping him in every way. A few days later, Drive West and Dr. Sarah begin working on enhancing his physical abilities. He practices motor skills and performs simple exercises. Every movement hurts, but the pain will fade with time. As he slowly recovers, Marc begins asking questions, especially about how humanity has changed over the last 70 years. He had imagined a future full of flying cars, space travel, and colonies on other planets. But that was just science fiction. Humanity hasn't changed much, only in small ways. One of the biggest differences is how people view love and relationships. Most no longer seek lifelong partners or build traditional families. Instead, they value freedom, open relationships, and personal space. Soon, Marc is introduced to a device called the Nanoscribe, a futuristic headset that lets users view and save memories like files on a flash drive. During his first experience with the Nanoscribe, Marc is overwhelmed. A brutal headache strikes as a flood of memories rushes back like an avalanche. Determined not to lose touch with his past, Marc begins using the Nanoscribe regularly, learning to control it and access his memories. Through it, he sees glimpses of childhood, old friends, past loves, and family. Mentally, he returns to the moments that made him truly happy. The next morning, Elizabeth is caring for him and answering his many questions. Although she appears young, she reveals she's actually 46. She has no family or children, embracing modern views on love and life. Elizabeth is open to being intimate with Marc and is willing to do whatever it takes to keep him from feeling alone, but first he must regain physical strength. That night, Marc struggles to sleep. Restless, he gets out of bed for a short walk. Using a support device, he finds himself in front of a mirror. But instead of a young man, he sees a horrifying old figure staring back. He knows it's in his mind, after all. He's technically over 100 years old. Startled, he collapses and can't get up. His body sends out a critical alert. He drags himself to the connection port and plugs in, hoping to ease the pain and send an emergency signal to the medical team. Each passing moment pulls Marc deeper into memories. He's overwhelmed by how much his life has changed. It all feels like a different reality, like his past is just an illusion. But it's a world he desperately wants to return to. He remembers the first girl who cared for him, his early business struggles, and the people who supported him. Soon, the medical team holds an emergency meeting. One part of Marc's brain is starting to fail under pressure. For reasons they don't yet understand, his brain is malfunctioning, risking a complete memory loss. Marc begs everyone to leave the room. He needs to speak to Drive West alone. In a quiet, emotional moment, the doctor confesses that Marc may never live a normal life. His body is too weak to function on its own. Worse, public opinion is turning against miracle health. People are growing uncomfortable with reviving the dead and cloning human tissue. Protests are rising. Marc is devastated. It means he'll have to stay inside the clinic, constantly monitored, with no real hope of building a life outside. Time passes, and the doctors gather to celebrate a milestone. It's been 100 days since Marc was brought back. No one is happier than Elizabeth. By now, she's not just his assistant, but his lover. To mark the occasion, Drive West returns a box of Marc's personal belongings. Inside, Marc finds his old journal, dried flowers from girls who once cared for him, a childhood toy ball, and photos of his early inventions. Among the items is something he doesn't recognize, a letter he's never seen before. It turns out to be from Naomi, the woman he loved before he died. As he reads the letter, memories of Naomi flood back. Their love feels like it belonged to another lifetime, yet somehow, it was timeless. They met in college as teenagers and went through countless challenges to be together. Naomi had been in a relationship with someone else, which meant Marc had to endure her disappearances and secret meetings. Sometimes they barely saw each other, sometimes not for years. When Naomi grew tired of their complicated relationship, she would drift, sometimes sleeping with strangers. But no matter what happened, their love always found a way to survive. Just when it seemed they might finally have a chance at happiness, Marc was hit with devastating news. He was sick and only had a year to live. Right now, Marc is overwhelmed by memories, but he still wants to read Naomi's letter from the year 2033. In it, she reveals that at 50 years old, she finally realized she had loved only him her entire life. After losing her friends, family, and the partner she'd been with for years, Naomi decided to undergo a similar experiment. She froze herself in a cryo chamber, hoping to be revived 50 years later so she could be with Marc. When Marc learns this, he turns to Drive West, asking about Naomi and how soon she might be brought back. Drive West explains that human resurrection is an incredibly complex, time-consuming, and most importantly, extremely expensive process. Investors had funded Marc's revival because they were interested in his case. But successful resurrections are only possible for people who are strong and relatively healthy. Marc died just in time, before his illness had severely damaged his internal organs. Naomi, on the other hand, lived until 50 and developed chronic illnesses, making her revival not only dangerous, but very unlikely to succeed. Realizing that the woman he loves will probably never come back, Marc falls into depression. He spends hours looking at old photos, remembering the time they shared. Back when she found out about Marc's illness and his decision to join a private cryo experiment, Naomi was furious. She didn't want him giving up on life early or risking everything in a corporate trial. That fight drove her to pack her things and leave, saying she was going back to her ex. The memory still hurts. Trying to let go of his old life, Marc asks Elizabeth to shave his head. Some time passes, and Marc starts asking questions again. He hasn't fully given up hope that Naomi could be revived. He just wants to understand why the doctors don't share his optimism. He suspects they've conducted similar experiments in the past, which might be why they're so quick to dismiss the idea. But Elizabeth doesn't know anything. She's new at the clinic and signed a non-disclosure agreement, so she can't be fully honest with him. Days, weeks, and months pass. The doctors begin to notice that Marc's condition is deteriorating. Instead of improving, he's declining. His depression is taking a toll on both his body and mind. He looks vacant, wandering through the facility with no purpose. Worst of all, his memories are beginning to fade due to neurological issues, and there's nothing the doctors can do to stop it. Elizabeth suspects Drive West and his assistant no more than they're saying and begs them to help Marc, but they just shrug helplessly. That evening, Elizabeth, now in love with Marc, tries to comfort him. She gives him a sedative and dims the lights so they can be intimate. Technically, he's not yet cleared for physical exertion, but she doesn't care. She hopes being close to her might distract him from Naomi, but quickly realizes she was wrong. Even in this moment, Marc is still comparing her to the woman he lost, unable to let go of the past. Later that night, Marc sneaks into Drive West's office and steals memory cards containing his stored recollections. When he watches them, he uncovers a horrifying truth the private company has been hiding. The scientists had tried to resurrect hundreds of people, and every attempt had ended in failure. Not a single patient survived. Those who were brought back briefly experienced nothing but terror, pain, and suffering before dying again. Sometime later, Drive West gathers investors and patrons to present the clinic's achievements. He promises a great future for medicine in their Project Lazarus, claiming that Marc's successful resurrection is just the first step towards something monumental. Drive West urges them not to spare any expenses for further research and development, but he needs to prove the project's effectiveness. He presents Marc to the public, causing shock and applause. Afterward, Drive West makes a shocking announcement, claiming he wants to launch a new project, one that would not only give life back, but also love. He promises to resurrect Naomi soon, but Marc realizes that this is nothing more than a lie and populism to gather more money. The attempt to resurrect a sick 50-year-old woman is bound to fail. A little later, Drive West visits Marc to discuss what's happening and what he's seen. He knows that Marc has watched the recordings, but insists that he suffers from every failure and lost life. Marc doesn't believe the fanatic's words, convinced that for Drive West, this is just business. There's no place for human emotions or feelings. The misunderstanding between the doctor and patient grows as they have completely different views on life. However, Marc is forced to admit that he can't live without this project and the private corporation, which leads him to accept his fate. Continuing to use the memory recorder to revisit his memories, Marc is transported back to the day he threw a farewell party for his family and friends. The most touching moment for him was when Naomi came to reconcile. She accepted his decision and promised to stay by his side until his last breath. During the party, Marc gave most of his belongings to friends and loved ones, leaving only Naomi and her love for him. Now, Marc understands that life is merely a form of material existence. Without emotions, feelings, and experiences, life has no meaning. It's empty. People and the connections with them give life purpose, and feelings and cherished memories are more valuable than life itself. Fully immersed in the past, Marc goes to the cryo chamber where Naomi's body is stored. It's here that Elizabeth finds him, confessing her love for him. He can't reciprocate, still loving Naomi and wishing to be with her, but he knows that's impossible. Marc admits that the last months of his previous life were the happiest he'd ever had. Surrounded by family and friends, living life to the fullest, and experiencing the full range of emotions. Now, this isn't life, but a miserable existence without feelings, plans, or exciting events. Realizing he doesn't want to continue living such a dreadful life, Marc asks for a drug to end his suffering. Elizabeth is shocked, torn between loving him and understanding how deeply he's struggling. A few days later, Marc uses the memory recorder to preserve all his memories. After recording most of his past onto a hard drive, he meets Elizabeth and learns the name of the drug used for ending life. He finds the very drug in the medicine cabinet and remembers what happened just before his first death. Naomi had been with him every minute, buying the medical drug that allowed him to end his life. She stayed by his side, waiting for his death, and then notified the clinic so they could save and freeze his body. Realizing that he had lived a happy life that doesn't need continuation, Marc drinks the poison and goes to Naomi's cryo chamber. He deliberately opens it so that they both will be doomed to die together and says goodbye to his beloved. It seems like the end, but the doctors oppose it. They use the saved data and Marc's body to resurrect him once again, against his will, because he is the result of an experiment with no right to choose or voice. At the same time, it becomes clear that even the previous version of Marc was just another copy, as Drive West has resurrected him dozens, if not hundreds of times. Can technology truly bring the soul back, or does it only revive the body? If emotions, empathy, passion, and fear are shaped by our experiences, can someone still be considered human without their emotional history? So that's it. Hope you enjoy the story. Subscribe and press the bell icon for more videos.